Woo, we're live. This is Math 40, section 3.6. And this is a section that may be new to a lot of people. This is a concept that I think is not always taught in high school or other algebra classes. This is a slightly different way to look at a line. And just to make it more exciting, I'm going to go ahead and start off with a demonstration of what the heck is going on. Now, the thing is that I'm going to say, feel free to ignore this part. You don't need, and I will tell you exactly what you're going to ignore. It's basically going to be this stuff. Everything that comes before this down here. Sorry, I'm pointing at that thing right there. You're going to ignore this if it doesn't help, if it doesn't add to your understanding, just ignore it for right now. Those of you who are going on in math, hopefully you see this again. This is where this new form for the equation for a line comes from. So I'm going to start off by changing the paper around a lot. And I'm going to say, okay, the slope is equal to y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. Does that make sense? That's the formula for slope. y2 minus y1 x2 minus x1. Now, I'm going to write this in a slightly different way. I'm going to write it as y minus y1 all over x minus x1. Now, this is a lot like telling a story with different names. So if I have a friend, Bob, who went to the store and bought 3 pounds of flour, it won't change the story to say that my friend Dan bought 3 pounds of flour. I'm just changing the names. So instead of y2, I write 1. And to match, instead of x2, I write x. The next thing I'm going to do is a little bit weird. I'm going to multiply both sides of the equation by x minus x sub 1. I'm going to multiply by this denominator next. Over here, I've got multiplication. So I'm going to rewrite this like this. Over on the right-hand side, I'm going to notice that these two things cancel, and I get this. Lastly, I'm going to take m times the quantity x minus x1, and I'm going to take the other side, y minus y sub 1, and I'm going to turn them around. Flip the whole equation around, and I'm going to get y minus y1 equals m times the quantity x minus x1. So in other words, all I've done is I've started at the formula for slope, and I've multiplied to get to this formula. To be honest, this is the thing you have to know, not the stuff that comes before. So everything I drew up above it is just interesting, or maybe stupid and boring, depending on your perspective. But this is the thing to know. And the truth of the matter is, again, I'm going to say for Math 40, this is going to be optional. You can get away without knowing this. You can do the problems you're required to do in this class. However, if you're going to go on in math, this is something that you do need to learn and be able to use. So it's something that's going to come up again in Math 60 and beyond. So this is point slope form. Remember that the other form was called slope intercept. And that one was y equals mx plus b. So they're slightly different forms. As you can tell, this one's a lot more compact. This one is a lot more spread out. And this form only has a y and an x, but this form has an x and an x1 and a y and a y1. So this one's a lot more complicated. So the question is, where do I go? Find an equation of the line that has slope 5 and passes through the point -113. Now, if I use my new form, point slope form. This is what the problem is going to look like. I've got y minus y1 equals m times the quantity x minus x1. I know my slope is going to be 5. And what I do is I take these two values, the x and the y, and I plug them in for the subscript values. So I'm going to have y minus 13. And again, let me use my trusty yellow highlighter. I fear nothing except for smearing. If I have my trusty yellow highlighter, there's the 13. Oops, sorry, went the wrong way. Mirrors. And then the other value in my point is the 1. And that's going to go here. Let me show you. X minus negative 1. So I split up my ordered pair. My y comes over here. My x comes over there. Now you might be asking, wait a minute, in the last section, this was way easier. We just plug in the number for b. And the answer is yes. That is if this is an intercept. This problem, this is not an intercept. There's no 0 there. It's a negative 1. So we silently curse whoever wrote this problem, which again would be me. And then we go on. We say, okay, fine. So I plug in the 13 over here and the negative 1 over here. So I've got y minus 13 equals 5 times the quantity x. Notice I've got a minus part of the formula. Minus a negative 1 becomes plus 1. Then what I have to do here is solve for y again. Multiply out. Add 13 to both sides. Let me move this a little bit further out so you can see. Y equals 5x plus 18. Okay. Now, remember I said if you are just looking from the perspective of Math 40 or elementary algebra, you don't have to use this form. You can get away with using slope intercept form. And in fact, a lot of people find it much easier to use slope intercept form. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do exactly the same problem, but with the form that looks like this. Okay, so this is a big or. You don't have to do both. You would just pick one. As you go on in math, it's going to be expected that you are familiar with this form. So I would definitely practice this if you're going on in math. If Math 40 is it, and then you're done with math forever, then, you know, that's very sad. And I'm sorry, because math loves you and you're always welcome back. But then you could just use this method and you don't have to learn both. Okay, so this one's a little bit less elegant. This one, there's a place for everything and everything in its place. And this one is a lot of shoving and jostling. So our slope is 5 and our point is negative 113. So we only have one x and one y in this equation. So we're going to have to use them for these. So the y is, let me write this again so you see it directly underneath. The y is 13. The slope is 5. The x is negative 1. And then we don't know what b is. Okay, 13 equals negative 5 plus b. I add 5 to both sides. I get 18 equals b, which tells me y equals 5x plus 18. Why is it 5x? Because it's mx, and the slope we know is 5. And then why is b 18? Well, because we did all this work. So you are welcome to choose. In this class, you can choose either one. If I give you a problem to do, you could solve it either way. So it's up to you. Again, if you're going on in math, it's a good idea to know both and understand both and be able to use both. Woohoo. Okay, we're almost done with chapter 3. I know you're very excited. I'm very excited. So here's the end of page 1 of 3.6, and we're about to start page 2. Woohoo.